I have questions regarding the Vikings schedule that came out yesterday. You guys ready for this?
Let's do it.
All right, let's start out with this one here. Where is the first loss on this schedule? Judd's got the readers on already, so he's prepared.
I actually have my predictions win-losses at scorenorth.com if you want to check those out. But my first loss is actually in week 2 at Indianapolis. The Colts did not have a great year in 2019, but I think they won 5 of their 8 games at home. Phillip Rivers looked awful in December as a member of the Chargers against the Vikings. But if I don't give the Vikings a loss there on the road in week 2, I have them starting 3-0, which I think is a bit of a stretch, and I think they will beat Green Bay in week 1. So for a multitude of reasons, I have them losing their first road game to the Colts to go to 1-1.
Okay, Dex, what about you? Where's the first loss?
For me,
Super
I
Bowl.
think, actually, no,
Wow.
it's 2021 in like sometime in the week 2 or 3 range. But I would actually say it's at week 4 in Houston. I think that's going to be a tough one. I think Deshaun Watson's really, really good. Bill O'Brien's a buffoon, but Deshaun Watson offsets that buffoonery, and the Texans get a win at home against the Vikings. So week 4 for me.
So I actually do think they start 2-0. I think they beat the Packers at home, and then I think they go out and they take care of business against Phillip Rivers. It's that Tennessee game. You know, they're not going to run the table at home. So we're going to have to pick, and there's some weak spots at home, like Jacksonville at home is a win. Detroit at home should be a win. You know, I think they should beat Carolina at home without a ton of questions. So where are the other spots? Like, they're going to lose home games. They're not going to go 8-0 at home. And so that Tennessee game, even though Tennessee probably comes down a peg in 2020, that Tennessee game is going to be a feisty one. And so if they start 2-0, I think they slip up at home and they drop one to Tennessee. Where do you guys think the longest winning streak takes place on this schedule?
I have it actually taking place. So I have them losing in week 11 at home to start their 3-game homestand at the Dallas Cowboys, and then reeling off consecutive victories over Carolina, Jacksonville at US Bank Stadium, and then going to Tampa Bay and actually having a good game and beating Tom Brady and the Buccaneers. So I have them being in very good shape going into week 12, beating the Panthers, the Jaguars, the Bucks, and then in the game that I predicted will be flexed to a Sunday night game, the Bears as well. So a 4-game win streak that I think comes to an end on Christmas Day against the Saints at the Superdome. But that would be an impressive late season run if they win 4 consecutive, and that's my longest win streak.
Mine starts at week 6, right before the bye, which I know it's a little bit of a cop-out, but they'll get a win against the Falcons, I think. And then they're going to go to Green Bay after the bye and get a win. They'll get a win at home against Detroit because they usually always do. I know at Chicago is tough, but that's going to get them a ton of momentum into Dallas, and I think they're actually going to rattle off 5 consecutive wins from week 6 through 11.
I can't be outdone, can I?
And then Teddy rips it up in week 12.
And then Teddy rips my heart out, rips Zimmer's heart out, and the purple claws are no longer needed. Well, actually, I'll need some more after that.
Wow.
You're unbelievable.
I know.
So you've got him going on a big win streak that comes to an end against the Carolina Panthers.
Obviously.
Because
It's my love for
You know what, though? If they go on a 5-game win streak and it's Teddy that also gets a win, really, like, Teddy is an extension.
You're not gonna be greedy by that point.
Oh, I'm choking
so you're telling me you're okay?
Listen, if they win road games, if they win 2 divisional road games and they beat Dallas at home, Teddy can come in and win 42-10. The Vikings are off to the races at that point.
Okay. Phil?
So even though I have them going 10-6 in our first schedule prediction, I don't see any win streaks longer than 3 games. I think it's a lot of like 2 wins and a loss kind of chunks throughout the season. So I have their longest win streak in the same spot as Declan has it. I have it ending earlier. So I've got them losing to Seattle and then coming back in week 6 and beating Atlanta, going into the bye, and then winning back-to-back games against Green Bay and Detroit, and then losing the primetime game at Chicago. It's a Monday Night Football game in week 10. So I've got a 3-game winning streak right in the middle of the schedule. All right, question number 3 for you guys on the Viking schedule here. Where are the guaranteed wins? How many wins are you looking at and saying that is a guaranteed win for the Vikings?
Oh boy, this is a tough one. I think, and I might be wrong about this, I think I see a guaranteed win in week 12 against Declan's beloved Teddy, because I think Teddy is. I don't think Carolina's going to be great. I'm going to say a guaranteed win week 12 against Teddy and the Panthers. I'm going to say guaranteed win in week 13 against Jacksonville. I think Jacksonville is going to have a coaching change. I think Doug Marrone is going to be out. And I'll give you one more guaranteed win because I think that the water boy for the Lions is going to be their interim coach by this point. I'm going to say week 17, January 3rd at Detroit, because you're going to have a football team in the Lions at Ford Field that's mentally going to be on a golf course in Florida. So I'm going to say that the Vikings go into that game with it being a must win to make the playoffs, but we really won't be all that concerned because the Lions will be coached by some guy named Biff and the Lions will be done. So I'm going to guarantee you 3 wins. I'm going to guarantee you Carolina. Might be wrong there. Jacksonville, very confident. At Detroit, super confident.
Declan?
For me, week 3 at home against Tennessee, I think that is a guaranteed win. I really think that's a no-brainer. I'm not in on this Ryan Tannehill thing. That's a guaranteed win against the Titans.
I mean, that is a Titans team that ended the Patriots dynasty.
Hobbled Tom Brady, which we're going to say for next week too, so it wasn't that impressive.
Are you also guaranteeing the win at Tampa?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
I thought you were going to.
I can't go there. I would say week 3 versus Tennessee. I think week 9 at home against Detroit. Obviously, week 13 against Jacksonville. That'll be a cakewalk. And then also, I think at home against Chicago on week 15. I think those are the 4 guaranteed wins I see on this schedule.
All right.
So I cannot guarantee any games against Chicago. There's just even if Chicago is a dumpster fire and doesn't know who their quarterback's going to be, for whatever reason, the Vikings just play down to them on a regular basis.
Chicago and Green Bay are very tough because a lot of weird stuff can happen in those division games.
That's true. That being said, I do guarantee a handful of victories on this schedule, starting with week 1 against Green Bay.
Woo!
I think that's a guaranteed win. I think it's. I just think.
Wow.
I think the tension between Matt LaFleur and Aaron Rodgers is palpable, and I think the Vikings with Kirk Cousins going into his 3rd year, similar offensive terminology and personnel. I think the Vikings are going to have a big week in week 1 against the Packers. So I'm guaranteeing a win in week 1 against the Packers. I think week 9 at home against Detroit is a guaranteed win.
Mm-hmm.
I think weeks 12 and 13 at home against Carolina and Jacksonville are guaranteed wins. And I think at Detroit in week 17, for all the reasons Judd laid out, is a guaranteed win. When's the last time Detroit was really jacked up and scary in week 17? You know, it's much more likely that they will have booked off-season travel by that point than have something on the line that matters. So I'm gonna say I'm definitely being a Vikings homer when I say this, but I think they have 5 wins that they should check off there. All right, question number 4 on the Viking schedule. What is the toughest 3-game stretch in your mind? We might all agree on this one. They got pretty lucky though, because the way that this could have gone down, like the Packers schedule has a brutal stretch out of the bye week.
Yep.
And their bye week is week 5.
I don't think that they have like a killer 3-game stretch, but gun to the head, I'm going to give you this one. I'm going to give you starting in week 4.
Okay.
At Houston, Deshaun Watson. That's tough. Sunday night game at Seattle. There's some weird league rule that if the Vikings play the Seahawks in Seattle, it has to be a primetime game.
And if they play the Seahawks, it has to be in Seattle, apparently, according to the NFL's rules.
And then you come home and play the Falcons, who, by the way, on Sunday, October 18th, I think you'll beat. But if I had to pick a 3-game stretch that I thought was tough, it's playing Deshaun Watson, Russell Wilson, Matt Ryan, who's still a good quarterback. I don't think he's great, but he's good, back to back to back.
Yeah, it's 4 through 6 for me as well. I really don't think that's the toughest one, but I don't think I'd look up and down and see guaranteed 3 straight losses.
I'll give you guys another one here. I think if you look later in the season, weeks 14 through 16, and there could be a lot on the line during this stretch too. So you play at Tampa Bay and Tom Brady, and I really think that by that point, assuming that Tom Brady's age hasn't caught up to him, and that's just going to be the ultimate elephant in the room until it happens.
Doesn't concern Declan.
But like Tampa Bay warming up just like Tom Brady always does in November and December. And then you get difficult division game against Chicago at home, followed by short week back on the road against New Orleans in a national TV window. So it's 3 games in a short stretch of time, of three games in 12 days, 2 against Hall of Fame quarterbacks and 1 against a tough and good defensive division rival. So I think I would point to that 3-game stretch. And then final question here of our 5 questions on the Viking schedule. What do you guys think of the difference between the Vikings and the Packers schedule, which I'll go over again here real quick just for people who didn't hear this on Mackey and Judd earlier. So the Packers come out of the gate with their first 8 games just brutally laid out compared to the Vikings. A lot of the Vikings' tough spots are just kind of spread out throughout the course of the season. The Packers get the Vikings on the road in week 1, Detroit at home in week 2, which they should win, then at Drew Brees and New Orleans in week 3, followed by a home game in primetime against Matt Ryan and the Falcons bye week, and then at Tom Brady in Tampa Bay, at Deshaun Watson in Houston, back-to-back road games out of the bye, home against the Vikings, and then at San Francisco on a Thursday short week national TV window.
Woof.
So how do you think, question number 5, the difference between the Packers schedule laid out versus the Vikings schedule laid out, how do you think that impacts the division?
So if I'm not mistaken, a year ago, Vikings fans were upset because the Packers had a bunch of home games early. And I think the Packers schedule a year ago was seen as favorable. If I'm a Vikings fan or a Vikings employee, I'm thrilled here. Packers, I'll start with a bye. To me, the difference between a week 5 and a week 7 bye is pretty enormous by that point. And so if the schedule is played as anticipated and COVID-19 does not play havoc with it, which it certainly could, but let's just say for now that all 17 weeks of the schedule remains intact, the Packers schedule far more difficult. If you were to actually, you guys, if you were to present me, if you were to flip these things and present the Packers schedule as the Vikings, I don't think there's any way I get you to 10-6, which is what I get you with the Viking schedule. Yeah. So for 2020, if this holds, I am absolutely thrilled. And, for instance, stuff like this, the Vikings from November 22nd to December 6th have a 3-game homestand. The Packers have, on 2 occasions, 2-game homestands. That's it. So I say, division-wise, significant advantage between these 2 schedules towards the Vikings and not the Packers.
I think it depends on how you want to look at it, because the Packers' schedule is obviously front-loaded. But let's say they do go 6-2. They surprise us. They win the majority of these games. They are in a easy route to win the division if they go 6-2.
If they go 6-2 in their first 8 games,
then they deserve it, though.
They will 100% go 12-4 or better,
and they'll probably get the 1 seed. So it depends on how you want to look at your schedule. Do you want it where it's sporadic like the Vikings? Yeah, we're happy about that, but also about every 3rd or 4th week there's a tough opponent. Where if Green Bay gets off to a hot start, weeks 8 through 17, they're going to win 90% of those games.
So I would be floored if the Packers started 6-2 with this schedule. And if they start 6-2, it says a lot. Like if they start 6-2 with this schedule, then they are a legit Super Bowl contending team. But I think like if you just take those 5 road games in the first 8, Minnesota, I think that's a loss. At New Orleans, I think New Orleans is favored in that game for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Out of the bye week, Tampa Bay, Houston, let's say you split those games. That San Francisco game, San Francisco just looked they outclassed Green Bay twice last year
on a short week after the Vikings, which is an incredibly physical game.
I think 3-5 is a likely start for the Green Bay Packers. 4-4 would be okay. We weathered the storm, and then it's a race to get to 10-6. So I legitimately think the Vikings jump out to a division lead, and then it just kind of depends on did the Packers steal a game that they weren't supposed to. But this might actually cripple the Packers' chances to win the division just based on the way their schedule's laid out.
So if I was to present these schedules to you right now and tell you that you could flip between the 2 of them, Vikings and the Packers, whatever you wanted to, what would you flip? Like what would
I trade for what the Packers have?
So yeah, is there something? Are there 1, 2?
I wouldn't trade the bye.
Nope.
I wouldn't trade the first 8 games in the layout.
I mean, they get the Buccaneers and Brady in Tampa on October 18th. The Vikings get him on December 13th. I would much prefer a December game.
The only thing, and again, this isn't enough for me to want to change schedules between the Vikings and Packers. The Packers after November 5th only have 3 road games. So they get 5 home, and in their last 8, they get 5 home and 3 road. And those road games are all very winnable. It's at Indianapolis, at Detroit, and then at Chicago in week 17. So it does lighten up, but like I think if the problem with having a tough front-loaded schedule is if you start like 3-5, you can't just play the math game in the second half of the season and say, okay, it's 3-5, but like you have to worry about things like infighting between coaches and players, and if they start 3-5, does Aaron Rodgers and Matt LaFleur have a rift?
And
like
3-5, like you're just in big trouble.
Exactly. Not as much trouble this year because of the expanded.
Well, here's the thing: is I think we all agree on this show that the Packers won 13 games last season, but they didn't really strike you as a 13-win team. If that holds up, we're going to find out by about week 7 if this was truly a 13-win team or if it just popped up and had a nice year. There is nothing about the NFC North, I will say this, that frightens me. Like it's just not that good to me.
The only thing
it's competitive, but I don't know that it's that good.
The thing about the NFC North that frightens me is the Vikings cornerback situation.
Oh, sure.
It's like
but every team has that.
Inflicted stuff.
Every team has that problem. I'm not sure. Is Nick Foles, who I think is going to start instead of Trubisky, is he going to put the Bears over the edge? I'm not saying the Bears are going to be awful on a train wreck, but I have serious questions about Nagy. I have serious questions about the Bears' approach. I think the Lions are back to being a dumpster fire, and I think Patricia is going into his last year as coach with Detroit. And when it comes to Green Bay, I think that they're just like with the Vikings probably. There's a ton of questions there.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be a competitive and fun division that very well could play out between, I would think, the Packers, Vikings, and the Bears. But there's nobody that I look at and say, okay, that's the definition of stability. That team is clearly better.
Yeah. So that's a wrap on this episode of Purple Daily. We appreciate you. If you're listening to us via podcast, you can also subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/ScoreNorth, and vice versa. We would appreciate a 5-star review on Apple and a subscription on Apple and Spotify, if that is indeed where you listen to your podcasts. I'm Phil Mackey. That's Judd Zulgad. That's Declan Goff. And ScoreNorth.com is also your home for Mackey and Judd, the podcast, where we just got done with another action movie rewind, Purple Daily, and the aforementioned Score North YouTube channel with daily Vikings content.